Hey, I'm Jim Sear.
And I'm Jocelyn Youat.
And you're listening to the Avoiding Chores podcast.
And we're right in the middle of our series in 1985.
Oh, that's right, folks. If you have not started from the beginning, we decided, you know what, we're going to talk about the 80s, how awesome it was. And then we decided to break down every year for each episode. We're in 1985. A lot of stuff has happened in 85. You know what? WrestleMania debuted, and where Mr. T and Hulk Hogan defeated Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Piper in the main event.
Oh, man, really? I mean, who didn't, if you were a teenager in the early to mid 80s, who did not watch, professional wrestling? Everybody did.
Huge.
Certainly, teenagers, especially male teenagers like us, for sure.
Oh, I was, 13? The height of the 18. Mr. T was my idol. I gotta say, Mr. T, I looked up to Mr. T. Mr. T was, I watched the A-Team, I had his figurine, even watched his stupid Saturday morning cartoon, I watched his little Saturday after school special, Brubaker. I'll have to put a link here. It's fantastic. I haven't seen it. Anyway, WrestleMania. But you know what? I was still watching the French wrestling show on Sunday lunchtime.
Yes,
with,
absolutely.
Edouard Carpentier, Neil Bravo,
no kidding,
Rougeau brothers, Andre the Giant before he got discovered in the WWF or E, whatever it is now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. He was called Le Géant Ferré in French before he became Andre the Giant. That's funny.
And you know what? It was La Lutte Scientifique.
Oh, yes, I know. Edouard Carpentier and all his... that was like we're getting a little bit esoteric there for a lot of people. That was our reality. Hey, 1985 was when Coca-Cola launched New Coke, and it still, to this day, is known as one of the biggest blunders in the business world and the advertising world. And it has... one of the quotes from one of the executives from the company is I think it's one of the funniest things I've heard, because I think it might have been the president of the company, it doesn't matter, but he was asked if after they went back and reintroduced Coca-Cola Classic, right? Mm-hmm. And for a while you had both of them on the market. You had New Coke and you had Coca-Cola Classic, right? And he was asked if the company had intentionally changed the formula just in the hopes that consumers would be so annoyed that they would demand the original formula to come back, right? And which would really cause kind of a sales spike, because you would have had to. So he was asked if this was intentional, and you know what his answer was? He said, "Listen, we're not that dumb, and we're not that smart." I think that's a classic. So there, he was saying, there's a bit. It's not that intentional, but we kind of had that as a backup, perhaps. Anyways. Quite the interesting thing.
Well, you know what? Considering that the project was called Project Kansas, it was going to go up in smoke anyway, right? But, the funny thing about that is that Peter Jennings on ABC interrupted General Hospital, that's back when daytime soap operas was the thing, interrupted General Hospital to say Coke Classic is coming back.
But do you remember why it all came about? It came about because Pepsi had this genius marketing campaign, an advertising campaign, where they were doing the Pepsi taste test. It was genius because they had a blind taste test, and in most of those, Pepsi won, because Pepsi had, if I remember well, it had a sweeter flavor, and in blind taste tests, people preferred it. So Coke said, well, geez, if people prefer it, might as well, kind of imitate the formula. And that's what they did with New Coke. And they really didn't understand that people identified with the product more than the flavor.
That was when you really discovered that you were a Coke person or a Pepsi person. Because there are people, and you know them, they will not drink anything but either Coke or Pepsi.
That is
and
true.
For me, doesn't matter. Both is the same to me. So,
yeah, for sure. Hey, listen, technology was big in 1985.
Oh my God! You know what? The biggest technology, Jocelyn, was that plastic thingy you put in the middle of your pizza, and then you put the box to deliver it.
No, that came out that year?
Yeah, that came out in '85. So that little triangle table that's in the middle of your pizza when you get it delivered, when you open it up, so that the box doesn't squish it. That was invented in '85.
But before that, Jim, they used to put a little ball of dough in the middle that would act and do the same purpose, and I would love eating that little ball of dough.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, really?
I only know the plastic little triangle table.
Jeez, that's no good. But technology. Listen to this.
Yes.
The compact disc was first introduced on the U.S. market, and I bought my first compact disc 1 year after in 1986.
Really? I did not get into compact discs until I believe '89. But
wow.
Let's continue
Which was probably when most people got into it. Really?
Well, not only got into it, it became affordable because the device that I decided to start my CD habits was a Sony Discman back in '89.
Right.
We'll talk about that once we get to '89, '90. But sure. I was still deep into cassettes. Cassette singles started coming out, I think, around this time, I believe.
Okay, listen to this one. This one is a bit shocking. The first .com domain name was established in 1985, and I would say that 99.99% of people had not heard of the internet at that point.
No,
absolutely not.
No, because we're talking about the last podcast. You were saying that you were using BBMs to download Tetris from Russia using the phone receiver and taking like a half day to download like 300 bits, which is nothing in today's terms, right?
Well, on most BBSs, like bulletin board systems, which they were all text based, right? There were no pictures at all, and you could read the text as it was actually printing on your screen. That was the speed of it.
So the highlight of consumer computer was either the VIC-20 or Commodore 64. That was
I had an Atari 800 XL by that time. I think I got it that year or the year after, whatever it was.
So back then it wasn't a lot of stuff going on, but it makes me think about some of the other stuff that came out that's still holding on. Like, for example, Tommy Hilfiger started the business back then.
Oh, really?
In '85. He's talking about stuff that kind of is lasting technology-wise. We're talking about, Back to the Future. We still talk about Back to the Future because of the dates that they mentioned in the film.
I know that is so true. Yes,
and that was out, and the Titanic, because of the newer technology, was found off of the coast of Newfoundland. Was also a big year in 1985.
And imagine this. This is kind of shocking that it's so long ago, because we're all using computers right now that are Windows based, and Windows 1.0 came out in 1985.
Wow.
I know, and I didn't use Windows until Windows 3.0. I was kind of, at that time, I was not on IBM based computers. I had, like I said, I did have a VIC-20. I had a Commodore 64, and then I had an Atari 800 XL, which I kept for a couple years, and only had what we called an IBM compatible. Had that a few years later, and and with MS-DOS, I seem to remember. Do I remember MS-DOS 6.2 or something like that?
Yeah, 5.2.
5.2, okay. And then Windows 3.0, 3.1, 3.11.
Yeah.
That was a few years later. We'll talk about those for sure.
Oh my Lord! You know what? I forget how in '85, Christy Brinkley, because in 1984, we talked about Billy Joel a little bit. Christy Brinkley was in that video. She was swimsuit, Sports Illustrated. By then, Sports Illustrated swimsuit issues started to be a thing. I'm like, oh, what is this thing? Hey, Mom, I want to subscribe to Sports Illustrated, please.
Yes, of course. Here you are at 13 years old, right? Just turning into
12 going into 13.
Yeah.
So me and my dot matrix computer, and then this is when people would make copies of floppy disks.
Oh yeah,
5.25-inch floppy disks, and they would copy. Say, hey, Jim, just like dope. Hey man, you want some of this? Let me give you that. And then I put in my computer ASCII printout of Christy Brinkley in a bikini that I will print out on my dot matrix printer, 5 pages long in her swimsuit. Put that on the wall.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, check that. Oh,
so hey, listen.
It was so
Christy
sad,
Brinkley back then was married with Billy Joel, as you said, which takes me back to the world of music. And nothing was bigger in music that year than the follow-up to the previous year's Band-Aid single, which was then in '85, "We Are the World" by USA for Africa. And you had Tears Are Not Enough by the Canadian contingent doing the charity single for Ethiopia, and then culminating in the summer of 1984 with the Live Aid that happened both in London and Philadelphia, with Phil Collins taking the Concorde and playing both shows on the same night.
I watched maybe 5-8 hours. There was a little gap in between, but yeah, I remember watching Phil Collins at the beginning, and then I had to do some stuff, and then came back after supper, and then here's Phil Collins back. He's doing his stuff. By then, he was doing. I think he just started his solo stuff. By then, he was doing more of his solo songs.
That's right.
The Genesis songs.
Yep.
But yeah, huge, man. I remember recording some of that. And then people were like, hey, I wonder if they're going to sell VCR tapes of this whole thing.
And they did.
And you know what? And that is one of the few things I have not looked on YouTube, whether or not they have Live Aid on YouTube, the show.
You know what? I have not either, and I'm sure they do. But for me, it was a gigantic event. I was such a fan of music at the time, and I literally was glued to the TV the entire day. I don't think, I got up maybe to grab a bite or something, but that was it. I needed to watch the whole thing. It was very important to me.
Oh, yeah. But you know what? 85 was a huge year for music. Madonna, Like a Virgin, Wham, we're at Careless Whisper, Into Things, Phil Collins with his solo album, One More Night, Studio. We had Simple Minds, Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Bryan Adams, he had his Heaven song, Duran Duran because it was a James Bond movie, Huey Lewis, Dire Straits, Money for Nothing.
And your chicks for free. I'm not sure that lyric would fly today.
No, not today, but Ready for the World, Oh Sheila. Remember that song?
Oh man, really?
Oh Sheila. Oh Sheila.
Unbelievable.
I think there was an extra in there, but anyway.
Hey, listen, the other thing, Michael Jackson, who had struck it rich the year before, I guess, bought all the rights to all the Beatles songs.
Yes,
every single Beatles song, and that was a huge controversial moment. I remember.
Yes, that's right.
Paul McCartney being very, very annoyed at this, and what happened shortly thereafter is that he started selling the rights for the Beatles songs to be used in a lot of commercials, and that really angered fans. And the interesting thing is way, way, way later, and I think only a few years ago, McCartney and I think Ringo Starr was involved as well, managed to buy back the rights to their songs.
Yes.
So good on them.
Yeah.
But
good
but
on
it
them.
took a long, long time. That was a big deal.
I do remember listening to that on the news when I was doing farmhand chores on the farm. I was clearing out the stalls. We had speakers with radios, and we're listening to ABC News back then. But hey, two groups in music, since we're just closing off the music. The Miami Vice theme.
Oh, wow, yes.
1985, Young Hammer. And Mr. Broken Wings.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty big, yeah.
85, huge. Man, those are 2 tapes, 2 cassettes that I had bought. Wow. Woof. A lot
Incredible.
of... oof. Anyway,
Hey,
you know
listen,
what?
in the world of video games, the Nintendo was launched. The
Was it
Nintendo NES.
Really?
Yeah, and Super Mario Brothers was the big breakout game that made the Nintendo
Lord.
system the ubiquitous game system in that era.
Duck Hunt.
Yeah, Duck Hunt. I remember that for sure.
That was it. Oh,
yeah,
man,
with
I
that
tell
gun.
you.
You remember the gun? Came with it?
Yeah, well, I was like a sharpshooter, man. I was Mr. Duck Hunt in our 3-house radius. Nobody wanted to play because I would just pop them off.
No kidding.
Oh man!
Hey, listen, 85 was a pretty big year, clearly, and it's interesting because as we go along in the decade, you know, the year after was the year. Actually, no, 85 was the year I turned 18. So now I'm getting into adulthood, and I have I'm starting to get a different relationship to the stuff that was going on than you did, because you were still, you know, an early teenager back then, right?
Yeah, that's right. And and I still had my hands on my toys. I still had Transformers, GoBots was kind of big. You know, GoBots that looked like boom boxes, and cameras, little 110, 120 film cameras that you would take pictures and then put it in a yellow envelope and put it in the mail, and then a month later you get your developed pictures back.
Oh, no kidding. Hey, listen, crazy. Before we close this one, I'm going to tell you one little tidbit of information which I don't think in our little research we did, I don't think you picked up on. Okay. In 1985, in Ottawa, the Chores Company was founded.
Really? 85?
So,
wow.
and I think you have some association with Chores, right?
Well, since I was an employee from 98 to 2002-ish. Wow, really? 85. Wow,
yeah,
they
founded
were around
in
for
Ottawa. Interesting, isn't
it? Very interesting. Hopefully they're still on their Carling Road gold building if you drive by there. I haven't driven by Ottawa for a few years, but you know what? They were in the big thing in vector illustration graphics, Jocelyn. They were really a pioneer. Adobe kind of won out, but you know what? Chores is still very popular in Brazil, Germany, and some other territories. Let's put it that way.
Well, CorelDRAW really was, I think the ancestor and the ones that propelled other programs, even Photoshop, was kind of a successor to some of the stuff that Chores was doing.
Well, and I believe the story goes when I was in there that Adobe pretty much copied everything from Chores and made it Adobe Illustrator, and then of course they evolved it over time.
Yep.
And Illustrator is the monster that it is today, so good luck trying to learn that. But Chores was definitely Draw was the most easy to learn vector illustration program. So I really miss it because I'm working on a Mac now, and I don't have access to the program. And if I had Windows, I would be still using it. Otherwise, I'd be using something else. So, anyway,
well, there you go.
What?
1985, big year, eh?
Oh man, huge year. I mean, you know what? This was great going back this memory lane. And I'm thinking about all the school dances that nobody. Oh, you know what? I'm going to have to drink some beers to forget some memories. To bring down some of these bad memories of high school dances or middle school dances here. Thanks, Jocelyn, for bringing up. Okay, you know what? Folks, if you like this podcast, review on Apple, Google Play, Stitcher. You can follow us on social media. Just search for Avoiding Chores. You can also go to our website, avoidingchores.com. where you can watch the previous episodes.